Hi, everybody. This is your guy, Austin, and this is the continuation of the series that I like to call Get the Immaculate Grid done as quickly as possible. So, anyways, if I go ahead and share my screen, last time I got it done in just, let's say, around 9 minutes, or just under 9 minutes, if I can remember to stop the timer when I'm done actually completing it. It would be quicker. But anywho, let's go ahead and bring it up. So Immaculate Grid, kind of the way my brain works is immediately I kind of like to do the vertical sections, like focus on the vertical sections as a point A, and then work down to the horizontal team. So I'm going to look at the Cubs and Indians first. It's a 2016 World Series contenders. So that's relevant because it was long enough ago. So somehow that's already 7 years ago. 7 years ago, and a lot of really, really good young players in that series that went 7 games, super memorable, and all those people are generally other places unless your name is Jose Ramirez, but that's the only one of those, all of those players that should have stayed. Anyways, and then a plus 300 average season for any of the horizontal teams. So what I also put in the corner here is it's not cheating. It's more studying before I do this, or like before doing this, kind of what I have in my mind at all times. Like the only amount of kind of the rules, or not rules, but like cheat sheets that I think in my head are I need to keep track of, like Edwin Jackson, Rich Hill, Fernando Rodney, and Ricky Henderson all played for a ton of teams. It's just for basically relief and or pitchers, or starting 2 relief pitchers. Well, Edwin Jackson's both. I'm rambling already. Edwin Jackson was a starting pitcher, transitions to the bullpen, in and out. Rich Hill, obviously, kind of like the end of the line, 4th or 5th starting pitcher who is still in the league. He's the oldest player in Major League Baseball now, who's played for a ton of teams. I think like 14 different teams. Fernando Rodney's played for like 13 different teams as a relief pitcher, like a really fringy, solid closer, but never a guy that got invested into long term, which is exactly why he bounces from team to team just about every year. And then Ricky Henderson, and of all these 4 players, Ricky Henderson, I actually have a good metaphor, or at least verbal illustration that I can show you to remember. So Ricky Henderson played for like 20 years across Major League Baseball. He played for every West Coast team, Canada, so the Blue Jays, and then played for the Boston Red Sox, New York Yankees, and New York Mets. So if you can think about the cluster in the Northeast that are all the three biggest market teams in baseball, Mets, Yankees, Red Sox, Canada, all of West Coast, he played for all of those. So I always keep Ricky Henderson kind of like in my mental cortex as I'm trying to solve this. So without further ado, I'm going to go through and kind of work through and try to get this done in less than 10 minutes. Anyways, I got 3, 2, 1, go. Okay, so first thing I think of, again, I think of like the vertical categories. I think of that Cubs team that was in 2016 that won the World Series, was full of just extra young people that hadn't even reached arbitration yet, meaning that they were either going to get contracts from the Cubs or get contracts elsewhere. And at this point, 7 years later, a lot of them are still in the league, but are majorly tailing off as we expect, but are still existent. But this is good for this game, right? So I'm looking for a Cub and an Oriole in between. And fortunately, one of the best players on that Cubs roster, who had a crazy couple years worth of production, was Jake Arrieta. And I'm backwards engineering this. This is like a Slumdog Millionaire situation where like I had a life experience that like makes me think of this player specifically all the time when I think of one of my friends. So one of my friends is from Baltimore. I lived with him in college, and he would always talk about the Orioles never developed pitching. We had Jake Arrieta, Ubaldo Jimenez, and Kevin the Gasman Gosman, and they all left, and they're all doing great elsewhere. And we can't, again, the whole narrative is like, we can't develop pitching. So reverse engineering this, I know for a fact that Jake Arrieta was an Oriole before he was a Cub, because my roommate Sam was very determined to tell me that every time that Jake Arrieta was in the news for being like the NL Player of the Week or Player of the Month over and over again during their crazy span. So Jake Arrieta, I know, is that filler. 23% of people. I thought it was going to be a smaller number than that. And then going down, so Cubs and Mets. Okay, this is good because you think of like, all right, expiring contracts. Who is the team that spends way too much money on free agents and trades and gives up like just a lot in general. And it's the Mets time and time again. And for just a fortnight worth of games, I remember that the Cubs at the trade deadline got rid of Javier Baez to the Mets, and he played for the remainder of that playoff run or that playoff attempt for the Mets. I don't even know if they made the playoffs that year, but I know that Javier Baez was being himself in the New York Mets market and driving people crazy, and then was not signed back when they had the money the immediate next year, which is hilarious because not a big Javier Baez fan, if you can imagine being a Reds guy. But Javier Baez, I know, played for the Mets. And before I second guess myself, I'm just going to hit select. Okay, cool. And then, okay, so the thing about the Mariners, man, the Mariners, it's like the Mariners and the Rockies are two teams that free agents never seem to, like, they'll get trades going both players. Like, yeah, the Rockies don't really trade a whole lot for all the reasons. But if I'm just thinking about free agents not wanting to go places because of X, Y, and Z reasons, the people don't want to go to Seattle because they have the craziest travel schedule. And, you know, obviously, like with the history of not winning, they had the longest playoff drought of any professional team in history until this last season. They have a pretty good roster that's underperformed mostly because of injuries this year. Mariners and Cubs, the Mariners just don't, I feel like they make, it's hard because it's hard to keep up with them because they're on the West Coast, and I watch baseball until 1 o'clock in the morning just as much as the other freak guy. But I'm just going to skip on this because my mind is completely blanking as of right this second. And so I think about the Indians as well. So the Indians, I feel like kind of have a rotate. I'm going to think of their starting pitching rotation that was really, really good, had a lot of production. And then I'm going to think about their outfield because their infield seems to just like always seem pretty stagnant with not really a whole lot of interchangeable pieces throughout the years. And they've lost like third base. There's been no movement with Jose Ramirez. And then Ahmed Rosario and Andres Jimenez are not moving anywhere. Those, even though those are younger people, the only movement that they've really had has been first base. And Carlos Santana was there for a long time. And I know Carlos Santana for sure works for the Indians, or the Guardians, and the Seattle Mariners. So Mariners, Carlos Santana, and I don't think that why I'm just thinking about this out loud for a second. So did Carlos Santana ever have a 300+ season? I'm not sure, but I know for a fact that I can come up with several players that were a plus 300 season for the Mariners ever. So I'm just going to be confident and loading in Carlos Santana and be happy that one's done and submitted. So the next also, yeah. So think about that starting rotation with, I remember Carlos Carrasco was really, really good. And he is either currently, even though he's not healthy, he's either currently a Met or just last year was a Met. So I know for a fact that Carlos Carrasco fits this mold. So I'm pretty happy. I'm flying. Well, so maybe to you guys, I'm not flying through this, but man, okay. So I know that the Orioles are always sellers at the deadline, or like not always, but like for the longest time, I don't think that the boomstick ever played for the Guardians. I'll just start calling them Cleveland. Okay, so before I get on a mental conundrum with these two, I'll just go ahead and fill out the easy one. So I know for a fact that like Cal Ripken Jr. did everything for the Orioles. He had the most consistent, game, or he has the most games played streak in a row without injury. Cal Ripken. And there's actually an awesome story, a funny story about Cal Ripken Jr. The story, there's a crazy, and it's really sad, generally sad story. Here I am, like, going off, not saying anything valuable again. Cal Ripken Jr.'s streak should have ended. He got actually was on his way to the Orioles stadium for warm-ups, realized that he forgot his glove, ended up turning around to go back home to then come into another man in his house that shouldn't have been there. And I'm smiling because it's uncomfortable. So what they did was he ended up having obviously a big personal conundrum, given that his marriage was it was over, and told the the general manager, he called the general manager and said, "This is what just happened. I'm not coming in today." So what ended up happening was all of a sudden there was a power outage only in the arena district for the Baltimore game that day. So the game had to be canceled and postponed the next day so Cal Ripken could continue his game streak. We think that there literally were like utility guys that were like hush money paid to the side to go like slash some power wires because the power did lose stadium, but only the stadium lost power and nothing around that. So they were trying to keep up the hype and the media around Cal Ripken continuing his game streak because he had an unfortunate personal situation. So anyways, let's try to get this done before the 10-minute mark. The Mets had their everything in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, late 2000s, early 2010s. David Wright was everything for them. So I mean, pretty positive that David Wright hit 300 at least once for the Mets. And though he was a Cincinnati Red later in his career, I know that Ken Griffey Jr. was the bomb.com for the Seattle Mariners before he became a Cincinnati Red. So now I'm just stuck with the Indians and Orioles. Oh boy. So this is when we go down to our chart. Can I think of Edwin Jackson, Rich Hill, Fernando Rodney, or Ricky Henderson playing for these combination of teams? I know Ricky Henderson didn't play for the Cleveland because he did play for a West Coast team, but did not play for Cleveland. Rich Hill, I think, played for both of these teams. I know for a fact I can picture him in an Oriole jersey, but I can't picture him in a Cleveland jersey for sure. Fernando Rodney, I don't think he fit the bill either. So, gosh, this probably isn't super entertaining, but this is how I do it off the dome and just guessing at stuff. So, okay, so we'll forget the the Guardians and go back to the Cubs. Thinking about the Cubs. Okay, so the roster: Addison Russell, not a Mariner. The third baseman anyway, the third baseman who always gets hurt, he's now a Rocky, and I can't think of his name for whatever reason. He did not play for the Mariners. Rizzo did not play for the Mariners. The not Dempster was before that, but Dempster I don't think played there, even though that wasn't the same time frame. Lackey didn't play for the Mariners. He was older before he even got to the Cubs, even though maybe he did, but I don't know if Jack Lackey's. Lester, I don't think he played for the Mariners either. So I'm gonna ditch the 2016 thinking and just think about like what recent pitchers or like players have come over just as mercenaries to play for the Cubs since they've been bad again just the last couple of years. And Wade Miley played for the Cubs last season. He might even still be a Cub. I remember when the Reds signed Wade Miley, he ended up having a no-hitter for the Reds. And I remember when they signed him, I thought to myself, that's a loser move. We're not going anywhere with that. And he ended up being really productive. And then we didn't re-sign him. And he ended up signing with the Cubs the next season. I know that he was with St. Louis before us, but he just I don't think he ever got that super long contract. I know that he was a Diamondback and a Cardinal before being a Red, and then eventually a Cub. So for the sake of time, now that I'm over 10 minutes, I'm going to guess Wade Miley with no confidence whatsoever, just because he's been around forever. I think he's like 38 years old now and just never got a long-term contract. So Wade Miley, and oh my God, that's awesome. Okay. And then just for this, the sake of things, I used Jim Thome. I'm pretty confident. I'm not confident at all. I feel like Rich Hill played for Cleveland for a period of time, but I'm not confident with that at all. So, I just thought about it. I feel like it's not cheating because I used him on like my first video. Jim Tomei played for like 20 seasons and has a lot. I use Jim Tomei a lot for the offensive production, numbers over here for like home runs and RBIs and things like career wise and season accolades. I know Tomei played for Cleveland for several years, and then he like rattled off a bunch of small market teams at the very end, the White Sox being one. I'm pretty sure that he played for the Orioles for a season or at least a portion of a season. So I'm going to just slot in Jim Tomei as my last guess and see if I am immaculate. And I did it! Thanks for sticking with me for that, guys. The rarity score. Gosh, that's awesome. I've been perfect all my videos so far. That's sick. Okay, so what happens now? Like they started like giving scores for the rarity. So to like pop out of this, the smaller number of people that have guessed this same player that you put down, the lower rarity score you get. And like golf, the lower the score, the better. So the rarity score is basically adding up all the percentiles across the way. So if I was to come up with a more maybe like a Jose Ramirez played for or who am I thinking of? Maybe like, I don't know if Francisco Lindor ever had a 300 season. Like last season, he might've had a 300 season with the Mets, but let's just say that Francisco Lindor had a season last year with the Mets that was over 300, assuming that there's less people that put in Francisco Lindor as an answer, it would pop out a smaller number. So again, what I said before is all these answers are cumulative, add up to 230. So the smaller number that you get, the higher the rarity score. So like you can have a bunch of people who have an immaculate grid and like technically everyone's perfect, but then like the extra like interesting thing that you can go over is, how rare were your answers. And that's where I kind of get cute, but that's also where you can kind of mess things up. So see today's stats. 82% of people got that top one, which I struggled honestly with a lot of the, or 90% of people. This was one of the easier ones I thought in the middle. Carlos Carrasco. And I'll actually think about too, this answer okay, Trey Mancini, that went right over my head. Jim Tomei, okay, I thought it was going to be more rare than that. They had pretty much the same stat, guys. Honestly, this is pretty similar down the board. So, yeah, this is pretty general game. Before I was pretty good about giving some pretty rare answers. Just a clarification too, with this Mets Cubs box, which I thought about later, but didn't think it was valuable to share in the time because I was trying to be at least somewhat timely. The Jose Quintana with the Mets now. He is on the Mets roster and for sure played for the Cubs in seasons past, but because he hasn't thrown an inning with the Mets, he would count against you, I'm pretty sure. So that's something to always remember. So I'm getting a phone call from my brother, so it seems like a solid time to end the recording, and I'll see you guys.